and I've got the good luck to finally be hanging out with Mike Vick. We've been talking for like a couple weeks, like we've been playing a little phone tag or whatever. So I'm glad that we could come here together and fire off some takes. I think that we came in touch through the Who's Your Daddy podcast, right?
That's right. Yeah. Adam is fantastic. I kind of, I had set up an interview with Bausch for a couple weeks ago, and before I did that, I wanted to give some love to my local podcast community, and Adam was the one that I really knew the most about. So he set up a brief interview to talk with me specifically about national politics, which is something that they don't typically talk about, but it's obviously something that's of interest to me. So we talked for about a half hour on that, and had a great time.
So, hey, I want to clip a part of your interview with Bausch where you talk about Bernie Sanders. We're going to just clip it. We're going to run it. And you talk just a little bit about your experience with doing all that. All right, let's let it run.
People talk about how Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. Whatever, okay? Whatever you want to say about him, he's a push Democrat, whatever. A social democrat radicalized millions of people, myself included. I started off one way in 2015, and I ended 2016 as a democratic socialist. And now I'm on this other path of I've gone from left-leaning Dem to democratic socialist to libertarian socialist, and I'm running for office because this guy ran as a Democrat.
And I think I think it's also a real testament to the frailty of the system, that in spite of America being, I'm going to use a very academic term here, cucked when it comes to workers' rights. I mean, thoroughly cucked. Like this of the bourgeois democracies, we truly have the bougiest. The Overton window is incredibly narrow in this country, or was. And the fact that in spite of all of that, in spite of a half century of Red Scare McCarthyist bullshit, stamping down anything even remotely resembling leftism in this country, the assassination of Black Panther Party leaders, everything, in spite of all of that, that Bernie Sanders can still come within a spitting distance of the presidency from the position of an independent initially is insane.
Right.
And I think that speaks a lot. I mean, it really is, you can stomp the flowers, but you can't stop the spring. I think it really does speak to the tenacity of the movement, that it emerges, as long as capitalism exists, so too will socialism, like its shadow. You can't actually stomp it out. It's not possible. It will always rear its head.
So listen, that being kind of an interesting video clip, there are a couple of things that come to mind as I watch it. First of all, you kind of alluded to your journey, and Bausch, of course, goes off to make his own point because that's how he gets down. Can you talk, now that you've got a little breathing room, can you talk a little bit about what your political journey was like, how you started, how you were raised, and what's happened maybe over the last 5 or 6 years to kind of change your opinions or move you in a different direction?
Sure. So, I grew up in a Democratic household. My dad was a union iron worker and a rabble-rousing one at that. He was involved in strikes and union votes and all of that. But my upbringing in that, my dad had taken over our local county party. And had made every effort to raise us in really a very political household. But my dad is a vote blue no matter who kind of guy.
Right.
He's left leaning, and when I turned 18, my first election was the year 2000. And I was really activated by the Ralph Nader campaign, Green Party campaign, and you know, so you know, I love that campaign. I love Ralph Nader to this day. But you know, I'm 18 years old. I read a little Marx in high school, so I think I know something. And you know, I vote for Ralph Nader, hoping maybe he can reach that threshold, that 5% threshold in 2000. And then what happened happened. And George Bush gets elected, and folks like me get blamed for that. I think wrongly in retrospect. But you know, I'm 18 years old. My dad, you know, I tell my dad that I voted for Ralph Nader, and he's not super happy about that. And you know, so really didn't have the intellectual wherewithal in my late teens to sort of push back against my father, who I still respect deeply to this day, and the political work that he's done. And so I kind of went to sleep. You know, for 15 years, I wanted the party to move left, but didn't know how to make that happen. And so, you know, I voted for the best candidate I could find in the Democratic primary, and then just kind of knuckled under in the general and voted for whoever the Democratic nominee was. And then Bernie Sanders comes along, and you know, I'm a political person. I followed politics closely. Was one of the few people who actually knew who he was when he voted, when he decided to run in 2015. And I was excited that somebody like that was running in the Democratic Party primary. And you know, so I went all in on Bernie Sanders in 2015, and you know, was deeply disappointed for sure that he didn't win. You know, it was obviously an underdog campaign from the beginning, but there was a real possibility, I thought, there that, you know, he might actually win an upset win there in 2016. And when it didn't happen, I wasn't in a position where I felt like I could knuckle under and vote for Hillary. It was a different time, and I was in a different place in my life where, you know, I felt like I had that both the underpinning of, you know, political theory and you know, actually doing political work myself, and I didn't feel the need to knuckle under anymore. And so you know, it amazes me in some respects the degree to which people that I respected going into 2015 and just like politically loathed coming out of 2016. You know, the whole MSNBC crowd, you know, the liberal crowd that I just didn't fit in with anymore. And so I voted for Jill Stein in 2016. And unlike my vote for Ralph Nader in 2000, you know, I'm in my late 20s, you know, early 30s there. I'm not feeling like I have to you know, respect folks who are telling me don't do this. It's a bad move. So, you know, I voted for Jill Stein. I'm proud of that vote. And you know, I start to move to the left. And you know, so going into 2016, you know, didn't really feel like I needed to
okay. Well, let me ask you like two questions, and one of these kind of broaden your thought process here.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a confrontation that you had in 2016 where you talked about, hey, you had that conversation in 2000 and you were like, man, I got to get out the way. What changed in your personal character or what you had seen to make you maybe more confident in your opinions like 20 years later as an adult, maybe more so in your own right?
Yeah, well,
Basically, like, what do you tell? Well, I guess maybe these are two slightly different stories. But like, what do you tell a kid who's like 20 now, and maybe their dad is yelling at them? Like, what would you have told yourself in 2000 to maybe have more perspective on it, or is it just something that had to come with time?
well, certainly it does come with time, and there is a degree to which, though, that having watched the Democratic Party drift to the right on issues like the economy and war policy, and watching people, vote for wars and extend those wars. Barack Obama bombing 7 countries that we weren't at war with when he started in office, and not prosecuting a single person for the economic collapse in 2008, and really welcoming with open arms folks that had worked for Goldman Sachs, that had worked in these sort of very compromised positions, seeing them fail up into the White House, and continue this sort of neoliberal economic policy. Watching that happen, for 8 years, and feeling like we could have done so much better, that we could have moved the country in such a different direction. And then, being sort of radicalized by the Occupy Wall Street movement, and seeing the degree to which someone that I voted for twice, Barack Obama, just sort of sit on his hands, and not take the opportunity afforded by that movement to move to the left. And not only that, but turning a blind eye as that movement got rolled up by police across this country, particularly in Zuccotti Park. And then, again, seeing a man who sort of embodied those values within a political sphere, Bernie Sanders, coming onto the scene, and willing to speak that truth to power, and say, listen, Obama was not it, that he didn't do right by the left, and had a completely different sort of theory of change in this country, where you needed a movement, not just a man, not just a politician, but you needed a movement around them to push for change, and not being willing to just knuckle under and go back into the Democratic Party fold and say that Hillary Clinton was enough, that she was okay, that we needed to just go back into that. And then, really having a better understanding of the math of it all. I lived in Illinois at the time. My vote for Jill Stein did not cause Donald Trump to get elected. And understanding that that most states were not really in play, and that in a state like my own in Indiana, my vote for Hillary Clinton, or my vote for Joe Biden, or my vote for any Democrat is about as effective as it regards the Electoral College as my vote for Mickey Mouse. There's no effect whatsoever for a Democrat voting for a Democrat in a red state.
Let me ask you 2 questions.
Yeah.
Number one, I guess I should ask just about Jill Stein. Throwing out the strategic decision of voting for a third party in a state that's not likely to swing in one direction or another. Like, we know Indiana is probably going to be a red state at the end of all this. To what degree is a Stein vote a genuine vote for her as a person to run the mechanisms of the United States government, or is it just a vote for the Green Party?
So in the case of Jill Stein, I thought that she had a very charismatic way of talking about these issues, and I thought that she was certainly intelligent enough to run for office and to be the person that I thought I would be willing to entrust the presidency to. The Green Party platform, I think, is one of the best in the country, and I think that the Democratic Party, would be, would be in a much better place if we simply adopted most, if not all, of that platform wholesale. So
Let me ask,
I think it's both and in the case of Jill Stein.
let me ask you this. In a world where it's 2020 and Bernie Sanders is the nominee, and you live in Indiana, which is a red state, given that same line of logic, would you have voted for someone like Howie Hawkins because the principle of building an independent third party was important to you? Or do you think that since Bernie met your internal moral threshold, that it was still useful for you to vote for him, even if you didn't think he would get the electoral votes?
I think it's a great question. I've actually never heard it phrased that way. So in the case of Bernie Sanders being the nominee in 2020, I think that there is there's a moral calculus there that differs from the one with Joe Biden being the nominee, because he does meet that minimum threshold. He's not my 100% ideal candidate. It's something that a lot of liberals think that he's some kind of cult figure. He's not. A lot of us are well to the left of him, but I think that the calculus there is a little bit different because I would want to see a Democratic Party run by Bernie Sanders doing better in a state like my own.
Right.
I have no real need to see that with Joe Biden being the nominee, and I do think that there's a potential if Bernie Sanders were the nominee to increase turnout to the level that perhaps a state like mine would be in play. Whereas with Joe Biden, with a typical neoliberal candidate, I don't think that you're going to see that.
Okay. Let me kind of ask you this as a question. We're kind of talking about the strategic value of voting for a candidate that closely aligns with your values. Is there anybody else in the Democratic Party who ran for president that you would have supported in a red state?
I could have theoretically supported someone like Elizabeth Warren, potentially. But that even she, really is potentially a bridge too far. Not necessarily because of her public stances on issues, but because she has really seemed willing to capitulate a lot more than Bernie Sanders has been willing to do so. And her theory of change is completely different, really, than Bernie Sanders. He's really more of a movement politician, and she has been really more of an insider, and at one time was a Republican. So, you talk about not being a real Democrat. That's problematic for me. But another candidate, that I think certainly has some flaws, but I think would have been less likely, certainly, to knuckle under, would have been someone like Tulsi Gabbard. So I would have been a lot more likely to vote for her than I would have been likely to vote for any of the other candidates in the race other than Bernie Sanders. I don't think I can name anyone else in that race because they were all different levels of fake progressive or outright neoliberal centrist. Our own hometown boy, Pete Buttigieg, definitely not somebody I would have been willing to vote for. I kind of think of myself as the anti-Pete here in Indiana. Yeah, I mean, the guy's like a walking, talking, like vision board of platitudes. I don't see him as a realistic option.
Mike, we're gonna take a 30-second break.
Sure.
Come back, and we're gonna talk maybe about where Jesus would have lined himself up in all of these conversations. So we'll take 30, and we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Not Safe for Wonks, hanging out with Mike Vick, state Senate candidate. And look at us, very lucky, have a special guest popping in. How's it going?
Hey, what's up?
It's going well. Just we were able to kind of get this show started a little bit earlier. And with Mike's so busy schedule, we knew that we would be in good hands with you just coming in and back and clean up. So it's always good to have you, Kennedy.
Well, I knew if you guys were going to get into some Jesus talk at some point, I had to slide in.
Yeah. So, let's talk about this for a little bit. You are a self-described evangelical Christian, and you're in a red state. What are your conversations about religion like with your constituents and your neighbors?
So, first off, obviously there is the fact that most people who would self-describe as evangelical Christians are not Democrats. They're Republicans, my conversation with folks about faith issues is that I don't think that it's appropriate for us to think of the Christian project, so to speak, the faith that we espouse as a wholly owned subsidiary of one political party. And I think it's dangerous not just for our politics, but for our faith, because anyone that we would be speaking to about our faith would think that in order to become a Christian, they might first need to become a Republican. And I don't think that that's an accurate statement. I certainly don't think it's a biblical statement. And so, my thought has always been that neither political party really encompasses the full measure of what I would consider to be the response of a faithful person to politics. And so I'm running as a Democrat. I've been raised as a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole life, but I have just as many problems with the Democratic Party as I do with the Republican Party on issues that may not be the same issues that a Republican might have issues with them on, but that neither political party really encompasses my values. as a Christian or as a human being.
I think a lot of people, have at some point heard the argument at this point of like, oh, if you really were following the teachings of Christ, you'd be a leftist or something along those lines. And I'm curious, I don't necessarily, we don't have to get it mired into all the details of like the biblical scholarship of this or that, but I'm just curious from your perspective, were there any particular people or books or sources that kind of influenced you in your like left-wing view of Christianity?
So there are some Dorothy Day. I think is a fantastic person to look into her history. Leo Tolstoy, folks know him from his fiction writing, but he actually wrote a book called "The Kingdom of God is Within You," which is one of the seminal Christian anarchist writings in the sort of modern era. I think that there are some other folks that come to mind. A gentleman that I was just recently introduced to, Michael Bennett, was raised as a more politically conservative person. Saw the problems with the corporatization of Christian media and the degree to which they were not really following the will of God as it pertained to economics and war policy, and ended up voting for Bernie Sanders in 2016, and voted for Jill Stein also in 2016, and wrote a book recently called Two Masters, Two Gospels, about the ways in which conservative Christian media has been co-opted by really corporate interests, and is not really focused on the faith, but is really more focused on shepherding people into the conservative economic philosophies, really of folks like Ayn Rand, who many conservative Christians follow her teachings, even though she was a militant atheist and was actually against the very idea of charity, let alone Christianity. I would say that folks like that, really have influenced my thinking on Christian politics.
What is Christian anarchism?
So it's the notion, especially within traditional anarchism, the notion that that any hierarchy that exists within our human sphere first has to justify itself, and if it cannot justify itself, then it has to be eliminated. And so Christian anarchism really takes that to sort of a religious level of saying that we are all evil, and that therefore no single one of us should get to have too much power over another, and that the only being in history that has been able to justify hierarchy is our relationship between ourselves and God, and that no other human entity has that sort of justification, and whether that's within the political sphere or the economic sphere. So it tends to work itself out in a way that's not terribly dissimilar to any other anarchist philosophy, except that typically anarchists might take that to the level of questioning any kind of hierarchy whatsoever, including the very existence and of God. So yeah.
Well, I'll just ask your personal opinion. When does the state use its power unjustly? When do we know that the state is operating beyond its natural lines?
Well, I mean, I would argue that the very existence of a state is an imposition of unjust power, but certainly the state props up prisons, props up authoritarianism within the sphere of the police, and authoritarianism within the sphere of imposing violence, both internally and also externally with war policy. So, I'm about as close to an absolute pacifist as you can get without being an absolute pacifist. So, I would say that certainly war policy is a bridge too far for the average Christian anarchist. So the degree to which we as a society are organized around an imperialist military policy is certainly something that I would not support.
I think a lot of atheist anarchists, as you kind of mentioned, they tend to inherently view the existence of God as a hierarchical relationship. I'm curious, do you view it that way, or do you think that the relationship with God perhaps is not hierarchical, or what's your kind of, where do you fall on that?
So, I do think that it is a hierarchy. I don't think that it's a hierarchy that has no justification. I believe that God created us and therefore has a right to that hierarchy that we don't have as created beings. But I will say that I don't view that hierarchy in the same way that I would view human hierarchies, precisely because God loves us and desires to have a relationship with us, and I believe lives inside of us in the form of the Holy Spirit. So I think that level of intimacy and relationship is something that you don't really get with the sort of top-down hierarchical relationship that we might have with the government, or with police, or with our boss at work, and also with more hierarchical religious institutions that might give to themselves more power than is actually granted in the Bible.
As someone who is left leaning, can you talk about, like, you have discussions like frequently with people in your own neighborhood who think that, like, the existence of a national healthcare system is an unfair imposition of the state, or think that the existence of SNAP is an unfair imposition of the state, or think the existence of Social Security is an unfair imposition of the state. So in these communities where, like, we kind of think of our relationship to the state as like a coercive relationship, especially if you talk to somebody that's in a more rural area and maybe they're not interacting with the government to the same degree as somebody in the city. What rhetorical bridges do you use, whether they're a moral perspective or something else, where you would say, hey, this is something that it's beneficial to the people for the government to have a role in?
So, first off, I would say that that nobody who thinks that it's an imposition for the state to pay for healthcare would say the same typically about having the state pay for a prison or having the state pay for a police force. And these are things that actually oppress people in reality, not in the hypothetical imaginations of a person. So, I would say that, ultimately, as a libertarian socialist, my desire would be to go more toward mutual aid networks, as a goal for everything, including healthcare. But we have a state right now, and I think that there is a societal good that can be gleaned from providing carrots rather than sticks from the state. So I think that we live in a society, and within a church atmosphere, we often gather funds to help folks, whether it's homeless outreach or gathering food for folks in order to feed the hungry, and so I think that we should want a society that reflects those kind of values. And I would also point out to those on the more conservative libertarian right who say that taxes are theft, that when Jesus was asked about this question, he specifically refused to say anything like that. He actually said specifically to render under Caesar that which is Caesar's. And we have a benefit over and above what he had in his time here on earth, which is that, at least in theory, if not in practice, we are Caesar in a democratic republic. And we should be trying to make it more so. I want a decentralization of authority so that people in their local communities have more power over where that money goes and what our local governments are doing. But I think that our goal should be to care for the basic needs of people, and in that way deal with the kind of problems that come about when we don't care for the basic needs of people, and we end up with a situation where we feel like we need the sticks rather than the carrots.
Go ahead.
Do you feel like being an evangelical Christian, kind of trying to bring more people towards the left in a relatively conservative place, is an advantage? Or do you feel like you're still met with resistance even with that kind of one key?
I'm certainly met with resistance, but it's not the degree of resistance that someone would be met with if they had to be truthful and say, I'm a leftist and I'm also an atheist. I'm not just a someone who professes Christianity. I'm a theologically conservative evangelical Christian, meaning I believe that the Bible is the Word of God. So typically speaking, on the center left, on to the left, if you are a Christian at all, then you are a liberal theologically, and I am not. So you're not going to be able to reach people in the same degree as you would be able to, with. I have a companion here.
Yes, trust me, they're getting more attention than you right now. Yeah, the Lord. How you doing?
Good.
Absolutely.
This is my daughter. So in any event, she's been the one in the background making noises. They're playing Minecraft.
So literally, Minecraft, the official game of this show. Rachel, her daughter, plays Minecraft. Just all
A
the
child playing Minecraft in the background is so normal for this channel that like I can't even. It doesn't even shock me.
Yeah, well, that's good because they do it all the time, and Daddy plays with them as well. Although of course I do try to teach them to play cooperatively rather than randomly hitting each other with swords, which tends to cause a lot more fights than anything.
True. Fire sword. That is not true.
You're getting busted. You're getting busted. How much time do you have? Do you have less time for Minecraft sessions than you used to?
Yeah, for sure. Although more time than I did when I was working 60-hour work weeks and I barely saw them.
What were you doing?
I was the field canvas director for Citizens Action Coalition, which is our state's largest consumer advocacy organization, specializing
in the Ralph Nader influence there.
It is. So we specialize in utility policy and energy policy, making sure that folks aren't getting gouged by their electric company or being put upon in that way, and then trying to push for green renewable energy in the state as well. I was the field canvas director before COVID hit. We were going door to door and talking with folks, about how they can do the, pair with the work that we're doing both politically, but also financially. We are citizen funded. We wouldn't go door to door and let folks know about how they could get involved in that work.
And that's potentially like a big advantage for you. I mean, you're somebody where like it's very uphill, but not impossible for you to win the seat. It's like +8 Republican.
Yes.
Extremely hard sledding, but like bigger things have happened before. In terms of the conversations that you have in your own district, what are the topics that you feel like get big breakthroughs and get buy-in from people that live there, where they might be right-wing leaning, but when they hear you talk about the subject, their eyes kind of light up and there's like a connection? Sure.
So, our district is situated in the most expensive county to live in the state, Hamilton County.
Yeah.
And so it hits people's pocketbooks, whether they are on the left or on the right. And so, someone like myself who, really wants to move in the direction of more economic egalitarianism and trying to make sure that the average person, working people, working families, middle income folks are doing better in the economy by raising the minimum wage, by getting more involvement of workplace democracy, whether that's unions or worker co-ops, those kinds of things. Folks get activated on those issues regardless of their politics, in the same way that they get activated on the issues that I talk about in my my work week with CAC, because your utility company doesn't care about red or blue. They care about green and getting more of it out of your pocket. And so when I talk about these issues, it resonates with people across the political spectrum.
So listen, we're going to come back. And when we come back, we'll talk about that canvassing. We'll talk about mutual aid. We'll talk about building these communities that can survive hard times. We'll probably talk a little bit about right to repair. If you don't know about that whole issue, you'll find out about it in the next segment. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. We'll have a good time. So, welcome back. I want to talk, we've kind of gone through the introduction and the backstory. We kind of talked about connecting with the people and religiosity and all that cool stuff. I want to talk a little bit about community self-sufficiency, especially in like a district where like you've got a farming community. Like what are the breaking needs? And Kennedy also farmer, so you guys can like have a headbutt about farm issues. What are the central farming needs like in your district? And maybe we'll compare them to what's going on in New Mexico. I don't know.
Well, so I live in a highly agricultural state. To be honest, most of the people in my district do live within, city limits of Noblesville. There's a small part of Fishers, Indiana, that's included in our district, but there are certainly rural areas to the northeast part of my district, and a few other sections of the district. Rural communities are really facing the same sort of problems that other communities are, which is the corporate takeover, really, of America, and the degree to which rural communities are being squeezed in a lot of ways, both by folks within those communities leaving those communities for job opportunities in the suburbs and in the urban areas, and not coming back. Young people going to college and not coming back, but also, the corporate interests within agriculture, agribusiness interests, really just taking everything over. Our food supply, largely being controlled by a few corporations, is problematic from a economic standpoint. It's problematic from an agricultural standpoint. It's problematic from an environmental standpoint, but it's also problematic just from a human standpoint. The old model of a family farmer is just going by the wayside, and in many areas is already gone. So that's something that actually in the work that I do for Citizens Action Coalition, we focus not just on utility policy, but also agricultural policy, and trying to push back against that corporate takeover of agribusiness.
What are some of the policies that would, increase the quality of life for people who are dealing with agribusiness kind of intruding and sucking up their resources?
So, number one, there are local ordinances that you can pass that would prevent things like large confined feeding operations from going into your community, and you can pass those. We've done it here in some communities in Indiana. The problem, of course, is sometimes the state legislature will come back and preempt the local ordinance. But certainly where you're able to pass those kind of ordinances, you can stave off the intrusion into your community of large agribusiness interests. You can do this with the reasoning that they cause economic and environmental devastation in the communities where they enter. And so passing those kind of ordinances, limiting the size of any one given farm, is potential there, as well as you mentioned before the break, things like right to repair, the ability of a farmer to get access to and repair their own equipment, rather than being forced to have a corporate entity do that work, is something that can certainly help local family farmers. And the move toward organic farming, I think, can potentially offer some definite benefits for farmers, particularly for the old way of life, the family farmers who are then able to find a better niche for their products. One other thing that can help as well is placing solar panels on your farm. There are micro crops that are able to survive and thrive in the shade that's provided by those solar panels. And so while you're providing energy for your farm, you're also providing a micro crop that in some cases, acre for acre can provide a great return on your investment for those seeds.
I think in popular culture, there's a perception a lot that farming is sort of, it's a stupid activity. It doesn't require much. It is sort of easy to do. But the reality that anybody who lives in a food desert and has tried to like start a community garden to help correct it knows is that farming is quite challenging. Mike, I'm curious to hear from you if you have any specific ideas about policies or like just sort of community shaping in general that could put the tools of food creation into the hands of people rather than like corporations.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I think that community gardens are an integral part of that, and bringing that sort of mindset back to communities where they're thinking intentionally about their food needs rather than simply driving to a grocery store and having it provided there, often at the expense of farmers in far-flung areas and at the expense of a lot of travel time with trucks and what have you. So, I think that food forests, community gardens are incredibly important and should be encouraged in any way possible, up to and including grants and tax incentives for folks to start these things, because as you mentioned, in many areas we have food deserts. My district is a little more affluent, so we don't typically have that problem. At the same time, we do have the problem of folks sort of at the margins of the economic strata not being able to make ends meet, and so having the ability to grow food locally at a low cost, or the potential there for community gardens where folks are able to get part of the harvest by simply working that garden, I think is a very good thing to have, and I would encourage that in any way possible.
You also mentioned right to repair. I want to follow up on that a little bit. It's been increasingly difficult, speaking as a small farmer or someone who has done it, for small farmers to make profit off of their crops, which is why you mentioned earlier, like organic and like specialty type stuff as being important. But outside of that, I want to ask what you think about like right to repair and other anti-consumer and anti-like small business type laws affecting these things, because I think that a lot of these laws, prevent people from repairing their own devices and stuff like that, can really eat the profits out of these small businesses where they would otherwise maybe be able to make it. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it's one of a long line of examples of where our laws are geared toward large corporations, and in many cases are written by large corporations. We see this with ALEC, of course. And so, I think that anything that we can do to move things in a more decentralized direction is a good thing. Right to repair is one of those examples. encouraging small businesses and cooperative enterprises, I think is another route to go as well. So making sure that we are decentralizing and funding the local economy over and above really giving tax incentives and every incentive possible to large corporations to move in and gobble up everything that they possibly can, which is what we've typically done, in this country up till now.
When we talk about community building, it's not just like that farm that's in like the top corner of your district. It's also like people who kind of live in places that are suburban, and there's like a lot of space between one place or another, and maybe there's like a long commute. What is transportation policy like up there? And what are the things that you think can be done to kind of improve it so that we can, like after this virus thing is over, like get to see each other in person in maybe ways that don't destroy the earth?
Transportation policy in Indiana is abysmal. There's really no other word for it. We actually have a law against light rail in the state. So that certainly needs to go away. I think there's a degree to which the folks that are making these kinds of policies, maybe not explicitly, but are really geared toward keeping those kind of people out of their neighborhood. And those kind of people are the kind of people who maybe can't afford a vehicle or really need that public transportation. So I think that moving more toward light rail, electric buses, certainly are good ways to move. Anything that we can do to get people out of cars, really, I think is a net benefit to society. Cars are incredibly inefficient, and I think that we need to be moving more toward light rail, high-speed rail as well. Although on the high-speed end, that's really something that would be more of a federal policy largely. But here locally in our state, we definitely need to repeal the law against light rail. There is a degree to which, of course, we've seen in the COVID era that there are many jobs that could have been done remotely that were not being done remotely, and they were not being done remotely in some measure because of just inertia. People had always done it that way, and so they continue to do it that way. And now that we're forced into a situation where we have to do things virtually, we're discovering that we could have been doing it that way all along. So certainly beefing up our internet infrastructure is an important thing. I think that the municipal model that has been showcased around the country in places like Chattanooga, I think is a good way to go, rather than the sort of corporate model where places like my district, sections of it are more rural. You're never going to get a corporation to do that kind of work on spec, because it's just extremely expensive to roll out rural broadband. But a municipal model, a more government model of rolling that out and getting it to folks at very low cost, I think is a better model overall.
Let me ask you something. You've been doing this for a little while. What's the #1 story this year, whether it's like national or local, that has upset you the most, that stuck to your ribs the most, and inspires you when you go out to work and say, I got to change the thing so that we don't have to deal with whatever this was in 2021?
So I think that COVID certainly has been the overarching theme, and the degree to which we have ignored the proper scientific and medical response to it, out of a desire to continue the exploitative economic situation that we have in this country. So we have folks that are not changing their behavior, in the proper way in response to a virus, because doing so would personally cost them a lot of money. I'm not talking about your average person. I'm talking about the folks at the top who, have used this virus as an occasion to consolidate their own economic and political power, and have not done what the great mass of people at the bottom need, which is to change the way that our economic system is structured. So rather than changing the way that we respond to a virus, we need to be changing the way that our economy and our society is structured in order to care for the basic needs of people, rather than throwing them out on the street, which is really what has a real potential to be happening by the millions with the eviction crisis that we've got going on right now.
Mike, I want to show you something, and can you just describe to me what it is?
Sure.
What am I looking at here?
So that is the county courthouse, the old courthouse. This is the old courthouse square, and for folks who are really like not from the district, they may not recognize that particular area, but for those of us who live here in Noblesville, it's one of the most recognizable structures in town, if not the most. There really aren't visually a lot of places that you could show someone who lives here, and they would immediately recognize it as being Noblesville, other than that area, some of the Victorian homes nearby, as well as the Morse Reservoir area, recreation area.
I got a big question. I see a big red button here. What happens when I click this big red button?
You go straight to my Act Blue page, which I encourage folks to do, and give to the cause. We can't get our message out without that happening. And so we need folks to come on board at any level. Certainly folks who are able to give more, please do. But any level that you give at, we're passing the hat around, and the more funds that we bring in, the more we're able to advertise online, the more that we're able to afford things like video ads, the more that we're able to afford the beefed up digital that we need in an era where I can't do the kinds of things that I was expecting to be able to do as a professional canvasser, knocking on doors. We need those funds to be able to get the message out.
Yeah, man, they brought you in here. You signed up. You went into that office. You were like, "I'm a professional canvasser. I'm the canvas king. I'm gonna get in here and rock this." COVID got in here, said, "No."
Yeah, so we are doing some modified things, what we call contactless canvassing, where we are cutting what's called turf, basically the neighborhoods where we go out into, and pairing that up with text numbers and being able to text people in advance of going out to their neighborhood and letting them know we're going to be out in your neighborhood. We're going to be canvassing. If you're interested, we can do it safely. We can do it outside. We can do it social distance, masked up. But we want to let folks know that we are out there. We can't do that kind of stuff without those funds, because those texts cost money. And that outreach that we do, regardless of whether we're able to get out to folks' neighborhoods or not, it requires the funds to do that. So any amount that folks can give to the cause, it definitely helps. We saw this with the Bernie Sanders campaign, really outraising everyone in the field who was going out and getting large bundles of cash from corporations. I am, of course, not doing that. I am not getting that corporate funding. I don't want it, and certainly wouldn't be the kind of person that would get it. My opponent he's got a large war chest, so we need those funds to be able to compete. Organized people can beat organized money, but it takes a little money to make that happen.
And people can dial into that in a big way. VoteVic2020.com. It's been good to see your appearances across the independent journalist sphere. They've all been pretty good, and I'm sure you'll continue to do light this place on fire in the future. And we're happy that you can make a pit stop over here on our show. So thank you.
I really appreciate y'all for having me. I'm not just saying this. Love your show. The independent media landscape is incredibly important, and I hope folks are supporting you all as well.
That's right, and people can support us. They can just go to patreon.com/notsaved. They love doing that. They do it all the time. Every time we say it, we get a couple new patrons. So
and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube so you never miss this content.
Never.
It's all there forever.
It's all there forever.
And that's YouTube/C/NotSafeMedia. We got the custom URL now.
Yeah,
Get in there.
We got over 100. We exist. We're people now. So
y'all are awesome. I'm jealous about that. I've got one of those long strings of code on my YouTube. It's the only one that's not /VoteVic2020 essentially.
You got to get in there and start posting, buddy.
we had the code string for like 6 months, 8 months. Now it's over.
we only really started working on it the last month or so, to be fair, but we're getting there. So thank you for watching. Have a good one. We'll be back tomorrow. Y'all know how it goes. See you later, and bye-bye.